The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you. He turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Or what can one give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to his conduct." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I'm just getting back from vacation. This is my first full day back at work, and I'm having a hard time getting back into the swing of things. I didn't really want to preach this weekend. I wish I was kind of still on vacation, but it was good. I had a great time, and it was very relaxing. I come back refreshed and rejuvenated, and I knew I needed a vacation. Before I left a couple weeks ago, I was starting to get really short with people. I was short with Deacon Eric at one point, and he probably deserved it, but other people... not so much, and I felt bad. I was listening to myself thinking, I need to take a vacation after a long summers of work. We look at Jeremiah in our reading today. He seems like he needs a vacation. God has given him a very difficult job to be a prophet, to preach a difficult message of repentance, of coming back to God. And things are going well in some ways, but in other ways, it's tiring, it's exhausting to have people constantly against you, constantly not listening to your message, throwing you down a pit. And he's gotten to the point where he's just sort of burned out. And he gets short with God. He begins to complain, "God, you duped me. You tricked me into taking this job. It's too much." Do we ever get to that point in our life? With all our responsibilities of family and home and work, and it becomes too much sometimes, and we find ourselves short. We find ourselves complaining to God. It's not a bad place to be. Complaining is like the best kind of prayer because it's so honest to complain to God. God, why did you put me in this position? That God is too much sometimes. And in some ways, all the hard work is unavoidable. It's part of the cross that we need to pick up every day to follow Jesus. But in other ways, maybe it becomes an opportunity to examine our life a little bit and say, what are our priorities? Sometimes our priorities are out of whack. That's why we're so tired all the time. That's why we're burned out. That's why we're exhausted. People today talk a lot about work-life balance, and we can get that balance wrong. I probably should be the last person on earth to preach about work-life balance because I do it. I'm really bad at it. I work too hard. I don't rely enough on other people. I don't take time for health, for relationships, for prayer, for more important things. Work is important, but it's not the most important thing. And maybe you're in that boat sometimes as well. And for others of us, maybe we're in a different boat. Maybe we feel underworked. We have too much life and not enough work. We're retired. We have a disability. We're underemployed. Our skills are not appreciated in our workplace, and we find it hard to actually find enough meaningful work. Well, wherever we're at with that work-life balance, maybe this Labor Day weekend at the end of a long summer can be a time to reprioritize, to look at where are we about in our life. Jesus seemed to always know exactly what he was about in his life. He knew his job, and his job was to do the will of the Father. So much so that when Peter tries to tempt him away from that job and say, "Hey, Jesus, you don't have to do that hard part of the work," Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." Just like Satan at the beginning of his ministry tried to tempt Jesus away from his job, Peter is here almost like Satan tempting him away. But Jesus knew what he was about all the time. And yet he had also had this incredible balance to his life. He worked hard, he preached, he cured the sick, he proclaimed the kingdom, But he also took time to get away. He took time, long nights in prayer all by himself, or he got away with his apostles to work on his relationships with the people that were most important in his life. He took time to get away with Mary and Martha and Lazarus and good friends and just have a nice dinner. We need that type of balance in our life. We need that type of balance in our faith as well. You know, if we're at the point in our life where we're overworked, maybe we need to take a vacation. Maybe we need to rely more on other people in our life, reprioritize things. Or if we're feeling a little underworked, maybe we need to look for opportunities to serve, to volunteer, to step forward, to grow in our faith. We always need to be working on our faith as well. St. Paul says, always be renewed, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. It takes constant renewal in our life. Constant growth is what we need in order to grow in our relationship with God. If we just stay where we're at, we can become very stagnant. And even our faith can become, if we're not careful, like a job. Going to Mass is just, I punch in and punch out, just like a job. I have to do it, but I don't, what am I getting out of it? Or do I understand what the Mass is for? To worship God, to give him praise for all he's given to me in my life. We need to work at these things. Here in our parish, we have so many opportunities to grow in our faith. That's why I'm burnt out all the time, is we do too much. But there's so many great opportunities to grow in our understanding of the faith, to grow in community and relationship, to grow in prayer and worship. And, you know, we have all the usual things we usually do in our parish, and we're starting them back all up this fall. We have our Alpha program coming up. Alpha is a wonderful introduction to the faith, to a relationship with God. And if you or someone you know needs that type of introduction, come to Alpha, take a card in the pew and invite them. But if we've already been to Alpha, or we already have that, maybe we need to continue to grow. And we have many opportunities to do that, but just to highlight a few new things happening in our parish this fall. First, for the kids, we're going to have a couple new things. We're going to start Team Jesus during the 9:30 a.m. Mass here at St. Mary's. We already do it at the 9 and 11 a.m. Mass at St. Michael's every week. But what it is, it's a children's dismissal during the Mass. So we call you up right before the first reading of the Mass. We give you a little blessing, send you downstairs to the hall, and there'll be teachers there to help you to pray, to help you to hear the readings at your own level, do a little teaching, and you'll come back up during the offertory of the Mass when we bring up the bread and wine. So if that's something you'd like to do, it's sort of for kids who have not yet made their first communion, so pre-K through third grade, you're welcome to come. We'll be starting that next weekend. We also have something called Catechesis of the Good Shepherd starting for preschoolers. And Catechesis of the Good Shepherd uses a Montessori method of education to help kids learn about the Mass. And where I've seen this happen, it's kind of amazing how much the kids learn about the Mass. It's amazing how much you can learn at that young age when in a very hands-on way you learn about the Mass. I remember going to a school that did this, and the kids were showing, they said, this is our monstrance, and this is our chasuble, and they knew all the terms for the Mass. It was really cute and really nice. They really appreciated it, but they knew what the Mass was for, to give worship to God. Great if you learn all that at a young age, but even as adults, we need to continue to learn. And so a couple opportunities we have for adults coming up. One is something called Catholic Conversations, and we used to do a lot of adult teachings, I think, when Tom Pietropoli was here a few years ago, and haven't had an opportunity to do that for the last few years. Now that Chris Carmody is full-time on our staff as our youth minister and evangelist, he's going to start up again some adult teachings, some adult conversations on a monthly basis. And so the first one's coming up. It's going to be about the Mass, growing in our appreciation for the Mass. It's going to take place on September 15th at 10 a.m. here at St. Mary's, or there'll be an evening session in Exeter as well. And the other thing that we have coming up is more of a social event, more growing in relationship and community. We have lots of opportunities to do that for couples here in the parish. We have our C3 events, and they're doing a thing at the Squamscott Beverage Place in Newfields coming up. And we have all these things for couples, but there's all sorts of people in our parish that are not part of a couple. Like, I don't have a couple. Like, I have a celibate vocation. There's all sorts of people in our parish that are single or widowed or divorced, old and young. And we want opportunities to come together as well. And so we're having a dinner coming up. It's going to be on Saturday, September 23rd. And you're welcome to come for a nice dinner. And we're going to be talking more about the types of events that we want to plan coming up in the future. So there's all sorts of opportunities in our parish. We're so blessed here in our parish to have opportunities to grow in our understanding of the faith, to grow in community, to grow in our sense of prayer and relationship. And it's good to have that type of balance in our faith as well, to do all of that, each in its own place. And so there's a lot to do. You could do it all if you wanted, but what I would like to challenge you to do is maybe just think of one thing this fall, one area that you could grow in the faith. Maybe you need to grow in community or relationship with others, to put people around you to support you in your faith. Maybe you need to grow in your knowledge of the faith. You'd like to learn more about the Mass. Whatever it is that would help you, pick one thing and seek to grow. We all need to keep growing in our life so that God's grace can continually transform us by the renewal of our mind, the renewal of our heart and soul, so that we begin to give everything back to God.